Hello everyone, once again, a very good morning and a warm welcome to Ravi Pathak Academy. Now, in today's class, what we are going to start with is nothing but part 3 of the Constitution, titled as Fundamental Rights. Now, in the previous class, if you have watched the video, then I had given you the detailed overview of the fundamental right starting from Article 12 to 35. And from that video, you might have learned that it is going to be not only very important part, but almost all the articles are going to play a vital role because we have to study a seven-fold classification as far as these rights are concerned. So these rights are classified into seven-fold, seven typologies, out of which one is eliminated, that is right to property, shifted to Article 300A. So six-fold classification plus two articles in the beginning, that is Article 12 and 13, and three articles at the last, that is Article 33, 34 and 35. These five articles we are going to take out of the classification, that is outside the classification. So they are not the part of the classification. We'll see the reasons why so. And as I've told you, all the topics we are going to take it from three perspectives. One is from the factual perspective, that is prelims part. Other is from the mains perspective, and other is from interview perspective. So that's how we are going to take all the topics. So this is a common strategy which we follow throughout the topics which we are going to discuss. Let's start with the first one, that is PD part. So here the focus would be on all the objective information, or we can say all the information which are factual in nature based upon the facts, so that if the option comes for elimination, you would be in a better position to eliminate the options. Then for mains, we'll take up the analytical part, analysis part. So that will do when we'll reach here. Is it clear? Okay. To begin with, now we are going to start with the first part, that is nothing but we have titled that as intro part, introduction part. And if you remember, I have told you that in introduction, we'll start with the basic understanding of fundamental right. That is, the first attempt would be to actually get the meaning and the definition associated with the term. Two terms are there. One is fundamental and other is rights. So we'll see the meaning of these two terms. Then we'll see the aims, goals, objectives as we have planned of the fundamental right. Then we'll see some evolutionary perspective or historical perspective. Then nature, feature, characteristics of fundamental right, and so on. So all this part would be related with making a basic understanding of fundamental right for those students who are beginners, those students who are starting their journey, and it will also help in content enrichment as far as the students who have already dealt with this topic are concerned. So they may also get some benefit. However, it is not going to be very beneficial for them, but definitely some sort of enrichment may be there. So without wasting time, let's start with the first part. That is nothing but beginning with or proceeding with the introduction of the fundamental rights. So first let's try to understand the meaning of the term and try to precisely define the term what fundamental rights exactly means. So first thing, in fundamental right, I'm sorry, in fundamental right, the first thing or the first term we are going to deal with is nothing but the fundamental. So let's try to understand first what these two terms implies. And the second term we are going to come across is nothing but the rights. And once you understand these two terms, then we'll try to pick up a precise definition. Is it clear? Okay. So when we talk about fundamental, fundamental is what? It's just an English term. And if you try to understand the meaning of this particular term, then here, anything which means fundamental relates to what? Let it be the fundamental of physics, fundamental of chemistry, bio, history, geography, etc., etc., or fundamental of anything is nothing but something like basic. So we can say what is fundamental, which is basic, fundamental of an element. We can go up to the nucleus, proton, neutron, and now up to the quarks level. So basic, we can say. Or we can say something which is essential, or something which is necessary, right? Something which is of utmost importance, right? There are many synonyms to this particular word which you can use. So something which is basic, essential, necessary, utmost, or acting as a root or as a base, right? Etc., etc., etc. So fundamental is something which stands at the basic, just like this building. So maybe the basement of this building might act as a fundamental, या जिसको हम नींव कहते हैं. So it acts like a base or a root or utmost or necessary, or required element, right? So this is the fundamental. But the question is what? That is right. Okay. So fundamental rights means those rights which are basic rights, essential rights, necessary rights, utmost, needed, root, base, required, etc. And what is the meaning of rights that we have discussed in the past? So when we talk about rights, rights is nothing but simply it means the claims, or if you have some sort of entitlements, right, towards anything, towards let's say XYZ. So if somebody is entitled to some claims or entitlements, from where they will get the claims or entitlements, that part we'll see. These entitlements could be legal, or it could be social, it could be customary, it could be traditional, it could be anything. But if you have a claim on something, if you say that, okay, this property belongs to me, that means you are claiming about that property, right? Why you are claiming? Because you have bought that property, or you got as a gift, or a ancestral property, or you have taken it on a lease, so you can claim it, right? So that becomes your right. For what? For basic. But the question is basic for what? Essential for what? Necessary for what? Or it acts as a root or base or required for what? That is what we need to understand. So one thing what we got to know is fundamental rights are nothing but these are the basic, right, or essential claims or entitlements over something, right? So these are basic or necessary claims or entitlements over something. Now the big question is what is that thing? So over what? And second, why? Why it is necessary, why it is utmost, etc. If that we can understand, then I think it would be easy for us to understand the meaning part, and that's how probably we can make the definition. So here if we see the term called fundamental rights, I'll write in short, that simply implies that it is some sort of basic, right, claims or entitlements. For what? Now, for, listen carefully, as a person, as an individual, we always try to ensure our growth and development, right? That means fundamental rights are those basic claims or those basic entitlements which are necessary at most for what? For one's growth and development. What kind of one's growth or development? So here we can relate it, the growth related with the physical growth. So let's say for physical growth, what are the essential elements needed? For example, we need food, we need clothes, we need shelter, right? We need security. These are what? These are basic things which is required for one's physical growth or one's mental growth. So something which is essential for mental growth, something which is essential for one's intellectual growth, something which is utmost or required for one's physical, mental, intellectual, moral growth, something which is utmost or required for one's spiritual growth, right? Something which is required for one's, you know, educational growth, something which is required for one's political growth, social growth, economic growth, cultural growth, right, etc., etc., etc. Point here is what? Let the growth would be of any types. While writing in the exam, you can write these terms, whatever you remember. So, what is fundamental right? These are nothing but the basic claims or entitlements, right, of a person for what? His or her physical, mental, moral, psychological, physiological, spiritual, educational, entertainment oriented, political, social, economic, cultural growth, and so on. So, like that, you can write, right? So, I hope you're understanding what is the meaning of fundamental right. It simply means these are the basic claims or entitlements of a person which are very important for ensuring one's physical, mental, moral, intellectual, psychological, social, spiritual growth, and so on. Is that clear? So, if somebody says that if it is not given to a person, then what will happen? Then obviously either one or some of them or most of them would be compromised. That means though the person will take the birth, but if that person, that fellow is not having the basic claims or entitlements ensured, then either his physical or her physical, mental, moral, intellectual growth may be hampered. That's why you may find some people are physically weak, some people are malnourished children, some people are what? Intellectually weak, some people are slow learners, some people are highly skilled, and all those things. It depends upon how many of these basic claims and entitlements they are enjoying. Then the other question comes from where? So basically these basic claims or entitlements are nothing but we demand it from the state. So these are the claims or demand of the people from the state or on behalf of state from the government. So either the state or the government should ensure that this basic claims or entitlements of the people are fulfilled so that they should be able to attain the highest possible degree of physical, mental, intellectual, moral growth, and so on. Is it clear? It's just a basic definition. You can write it in your own words, you can modify it, but your answer must contain, the moment you are going to write an answer on fundamental rights, the first and foremost thing you need to give the introduction or define it. So define it in such a way that what are fundamental rights? Give the meaning of the word fundamental, give the meaning of the word rights, and then club them together to make a definition. So that's how you can make a definition that what are the fundamental rights? These are nothing but some sort of basic claims or entitlements of a person for ensuring his or her physical, mental, moral growth, and so on from the state or on behalf of state from the government. Is that clear? So that's how you can define. There are many definitions which you can use, but this is also one of the definition which you can use to write in your answer. Is it clear? So when we talk about the first thing, that is nothing but what is the meaning and the definition of the fundamental rights. I hope now you will be able to write. In simple, what is the meaning and definition? It is nothing but some sort of basic claims or entitlements of what? Of a person for ensuring his physical, mental, psychological, moral, social, spiritual growth or development. From whom? From the state or on behalf of state from the government. Is it clear? Perfect. Then, after understanding the bit of meaning and definition, though not in totality, because obviously you'll be able to derive a more precise meaning once we complete the fundamental right. So, this is just a beginning. Let's try to get another aspect of the fundamental right. So, some basic points what you can remember in the introduction only that what is the constitutional position of the fundamental right. So, when we talk about constitutional position, then these entitlements or claims are mentioned in the Constitution under the part 3 of our Constitution, titled as fundamental rights and ranging from Article 12 to 35. So this is the second line you can add up as far as your what answer is concerned. So give a constitutional reference that this is mentioned in part 3 and so is the article. And you can give some attributes also, some characteristics also, or some adjectives also that what it is one of the most important part. It is one of the most important part of our constitution. So when we say one of the most important part, that means here we are saying out of total 22 parts, if somebody asks which is the most important part, answer is very loud and clear. It is a part 3 of the Constitution. Though all the parts are important, but if we have to prioritize, then we can say it is nothing but part 3 of the Constitution. Just for information purpose, when we see while discussing the Constitution, we had said, or you have came across a criticism that Constitution of India is nothing but it is also known as carbon copy of Government of India Act 1935. So it is a carbon copy of Government of India Act 1935, but it's not exactly a copy. Here you can say the most striking difference between fundamental rights, that is part 3 of the present day Constitution, and the Government of India Act 1935 is nothing but the presence of part 3, which was not there in Government of India Act, though there were some passing references about the rights, but it was not in as much detail as it is there in the present day Constitution. So this you can give a comparative statement in your introduction part only, that the most striking feature of present day Constitution and the difference vis-a-vis Government of India Act 1935 is the presence of part 3, that is fundamental rights, in the modern day Constitution. Is it clear? Yes or no? Then somewhere you might have read that fundamental rights are also termed as Magna Carta, right? So it is also termed as Magna Carta. Now the term Magna Carta you might have heard, right? Many other terms also. Some people say Magna Carta, some people say it's a cornerstone of the Constitution. Along with DPSP, if you add, they are also right. They are also known as conscience of the Constitution, right? So many adjectives are there. No need to understand them in detail, but if you know them, it would be easy for you to actually write first two paragraph of your answer. That is in mains. So what is Magna Carta? If you know it, it's fine, right? If not, then we can brief about Magna Carta for 2 minutes, and then again we'll get back to this particular part. Is that clear? So when we talk about Magna Carta, basically Magna Carta is nothing but as I told you, most of the things are derived in Latin or Greek languages. That's why it's difficult for us to understand. But in simple language, if you understand, Magna Carta means basically something which is acting as a landmark. So it is a landmark or it is magnificent, right? You can say it's a kind of watershed, or some people use the term, it also acts as a paradigm. So all these are nothing but the adjective for the word Magna Carta, something which is landmark, magnificent, watershed in the history, or paradigm in the history. Carta, Carta means what? Carta means charter. So what is Magna Carta? It is nothing but some sort of a landmark, we can say charter, or magnificent charter, or something which has acted as a watershed in the history, or which has created a paradigm shift. But basically what it was a charter. Now when we say what is a charter, so initially Magna Carta was only Carta, not Magna Carta. It was just a charter. Charter means a piece of paper, simple. Now when we say piece of paper, then you may wonder that why it is so important. So piece of paper hold importance because of its significance. Like for example, we use currency note. That is also a piece of paper, but why it is important? Because it has created certain value. So like that stamp papers, why they are important, right? Or any legal instrument, why it is important. So just not ordinary paper, but a piece of paper which holds some importance. Like in modern day, you might have heard about a term called gazetteer. What is gazetteer? Gazetteer is nothing but Rajpatra. So we say gazetteer of India. Now, if anything is written on gazetteer of India, or we say gazetted notification, the way our UPSC notification comes, why it becomes important? Because it will have some legality. It will have some important information or binding information which we need to obey. If something is written in the gazetteer or published in the gazetteer, that is almost like binding. So that's why it becomes important. Or in the earlier times, you might have heard about royal writs, which messenger used to take. So what is that writ actually? It's a royal writ because it's a piece of paper or a cloth on which certain messages were written, instructions were written, SOPs were written, and it is royal because it is approved by the authority and it is binding in nature. So something like that. Or in history, you might have heard about charter acts of, let's say, 1813, 1833, etc. So what were they? They were also a piece of paper, but with the sign of the queen or the crown, right? And that's how it becomes a legal instrument. So the charter become important because of its utility. Otherwise, the page on which you are making the road notes right now, they are also charter, but they might not hold that significance because it is lagging a legal connotation. If it is legally binding or justified, then definitely it will become what? A charter. So basically Magna Carta is nothing but what? It's a landmark or a magnificent charter. But it became landmark not day one, or not on day one, but later on. Almost it took 800 years, right, for this Carta to become Magna, or we can say this charter to become landmark. So it is not something which became landmark or magnificent on day one. It became magnificent after certain years of time. Is that clear? Okay. What it was. So for that we need to take a little bit dig into the history, and when we reach to, let's say, beginning of 13th century. Now how it is related with fundamental rights or rights per se, that part also we'll understand. So when we talk about 13th century to be precise and 1215 to be exact, right, we are talking about the Europe in general and in particular about the UK. So there the rule of King John was there, and King John was someone like, who had been proved to be one of the worst king in the history. So what King John did, basically, he was very cruel, no doubt about it. Okay. He used to actually do a lot of operations and separations to his subjects, that is the people who are residing in that particular territory. And he was very fascinated about WWW, that is war, women, and wine. So pleasure, war, women, wine, etc. He was very fond of. Generally, all the kings were, or most of the kings were, because they were actually in a vicious cycle of either contending or fighting a war. After winning the war, they used that booty to enjoy and ensure their pleasure in the form of wine and women. So that's how most of the kings were what taking care of their life, and in the process they need the what? Money, the finances to actually wage a war, and then it requires a lot of money. That money they used to collect from the taxes or taxation. So it was almost the story for almost all the kingdoms and dynasty, whether overseas or in India also. Now from where this money will come? So large part of it used to come from the taxes. If we talk about this kind of society, then there were different types of people. For example, the nobility was there, right? Then free men were there, then slaves were there. So society was divided and so on. And out of this, one section which was very important for them were nothing but the barons. Who are the barons or barons? Because they are the one who are the heavy taxpayers. Or we can say this was the community which was related with the trading community, the merchant community, and so on. So it's just like Vaishya community in India. If we talk about Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, so something like Vaishya community, which were the largest taxpayers. Now, what king used to do? They actually used to increase the taxation. Maybe from 10% to 20% to 30%. There was no limit. It may go up to 50% and so on. So barons were very much troubled because of this tax burden. And the money what the king used to collect, they used to invest it in the war and later on to ensure their pleasure. So this makes the barons dissatisfied. I mean, just I'm giving a background how it has started. Once you understand, it will be very easy for you to connect it whenever there would be a term called Magna Carta. So, when in 1215, what happened? That barons refused to pay the tax or increase tax, and this led to protest. The king started oppressing or suppressing the barons, and the barons have protested and captured the London. Right, that is UK. And there they arrested the king, or in one way we can say they kidnapped the king. Right, and the King John was forced to negotiate with the barons. Right. So the negotiations took place at a place called Runnymede in UK. Right. Between what? The King John and the barons, that is the taxpayers. And there were certain demands made by the barons, which King John was forced to accept. Is that clear? See, I'm not getting into detail because this will study in your world history and all those things. I'm just giving a passing reference. Now, when the negotiations took place between the King John and the barons, those negotiations were written down, penned down, okay, on a piece of paper. And this negotiations or the conditions, the clauses of this particular deal between the King John and barons is nothing but known as what? Carta. Simple, right? So that's how the origin of the word carta. Carta is what? It is nothing but the result of penning down, noting down those clauses, conditions, terms, and other rules and regulations of the deal or the treaty between the barons and the King John. So that was done in 1215. Right. So that's how we have got the Carta. But this Carta was kept amended, in 1225, then 1237, and then 1297, like that, until it became the part of British common laws. What are British common laws? I'll tell you when we'll do the Article 14. But you might have heard about a term called a rule of law, which talks about equality before law, equal protection of law, and so on. So it's related with that. That is called British common laws, or English laws would be called, or European continental laws are also known by that name. So here, by the end of the 13th century, 14th century onwards, we can say they became the part of British common laws, and which had increased the significance of Carta. But what was so important with the Carta and how it is related with our rights today? The answer is that though this Carta was majorly a negotiation or deal between the King John and the barons, but apart from that, the barons also demanded something what we call today as right to equality. The first time some sort of right has been demanded by the king, because already I've told you when the kings are there, the people are called subject and they have more duties, less rights. So the right to equality, or what they said that let it be the free men, let it be the slaves, let it be the traders, all including the king also. So right from peasant to king, everybody should be subjected to same law. Everybody should be equal before the law. That is how this Carta became important, because today we know that equality before law or rule of law is so important for any country to function if it's a democratic country, right? Then from 14th century onwards, right, and till today, that is 20th century, we can say almost 600 to 800 years, if we talk about, this Carta was became the slogan, remark for almost all the greatest revolution. Let it be the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, American Revolution, or India's freedom struggle. In one or the other form, this Carta has been used to present the demand before the colonial masters, before the rulers. That's how it became significant. And today, what we call it as Magna Carta, or a landmark piece of paper. So now I hope you understand why it is called landmark, watershed, or paradigm, or magnificent. And since the fundamental rights in present day constitution holds an equal status of Magna Carta, that's why it is sometimes compared as what? Magna Carta of the Constitution. So I hope now you are clear with this term, why it is called or referred as Magna Carta sometimes. So if it comes, don't get confused. I hope it's clear. Yes? Perfect. So, in your introduction, when we talk about the fundamental rights, the first thing what you have to write is nothing but the meaning and definition part. Once defining it, then you can write this couple of points so that examiner will get the understanding that the student who is writing an answer or this answer knows about the things in detail. It is nothing like we can say the copied, or we can say ratification of the facts. Is it clear? Okay. After understanding this, then let's talk about the another thing that is nothing but evolutionary perspective or historical perspective. So some brief I gave you in the form of Magna Carta. But when we talk about the what historical perspective, Magna Carta is an adjective which is attached to fundamental right. But when we talk about history, then as I've told you, fundamental rights are the one which were there in the ancient times also, medieval times also, because some or the other rights were there, modern times also, and in contemporary world also, we need these rights, and they are increasing day by day. So it will go on and on and on, because it is one of the essential feature of a democratic country to provide the rights to its citizen. Now, when we talk about its evolution, just in brief, it's not very important, but if you know it, it would be easy for you to punch your answers very logically with a sequential flow so that you'll not make the mistake. That is what the concern is. I hope it's clear. So when we talk about ancient, how the rights have evolved, now you might be knowing that even in the era of what say primitive, that is nature of state, or we can say the tribal era, they used to have some leaders and all those things, and those leaders are what are the one who used to ensure the basic rights to its people, what we call kabila. So कबीले का सरदार कोई है तो भी अपने कबीले के लोगों के लिए कुछ तो राइट इंश्योर करता था. So here when we see the evolution of rights from the ancient times, then we can say it starts with the nature of the state. And what was the nature of the state? Nature of the state was nothing but primitive. So when we say primitive, as I've told you already, that in primitive era what used to happen? The natural rights were existing. So some sort of natural rights were there. What kind of natural rights and for whom? So the people who were residing, right, they have got some resources which were given from the nature. So let's say these are the resources, R1, R2, R3, physical and natural resources. And these resources were more in number, right? And the population was less in number. But as the society progressed, we got to know that the population is going to increase now very rapidly. So there was a rapid increase in the population, and there was a depletion of resources because more number of people, that means resources are going to decline, and that's how it led to conflict. Because initially, if a person want one resource, he or she had three resources to access. उसके बाद भी बच जाता था, तो जरूरत नहीं थी. अब लोग बढ़ गए तो रिसोर्सेज कम हो गए तो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट शुरू हो गया. और इस तरह से आई हैड ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन यू व्हेन आई वाज गिविंग यू द थ्योरी ऑफ ओरिजिन ऑफ स्टेट. That's how it has started. So they came into a, I hope you remember the term, contract theory, which is popularly known as social contract theory. And under social contract theory, what they said that will form the state and state will protect our right. So basically what they demanded certain basic rights. For example, the first and foremost, they wanted right to life to be ensured. Then right to property should be ensured. Right to freedom or liberty should be ensured. So why I'm saying these kind of rights were there in the ancient societies also, when people were living in small states like what we call city states. And that's how it got escalated from medieval to modern times and kept on increasing. There were some additions of the rights which kept happening. However, for our topic, we need to mention or we need to understand its evolution more from a contemporary or modern era. Is that clear? Perfect. Just a brief to make you understand that how it has started. Now, when we talk about contemporary, then contemporary also, it has two significance. One, we can look at from the Indian perspective. Other, we can look at from the global perspective. But here our concern is not right now from global perspective. That means we need to see the evolution of fundamental rights from Indian perspective. And when we say Indian perspective, we know that we had a long drawn freedom struggle. Basically, the origin of the fundamental rights can be traced with the freedom struggle. What was freedom struggle or independence struggle? Freedom struggle was nothing but what? Freedom is also a kind of right only, which we wanted to have. So, right of what? Right of being free. Free from what? The colonial master or the external rules. So that we can make our own rules and regulations. We can make our own law and order policy. We can make our own taxation policy. So, this was the meaning of freedom or independence. And these are nothing but some sort of rights, which we wanted the Britishers to give us. Is that clear? But the freedom struggle, basically, in history, you might have heard about that. One phase was that when they came from 1607, death of Aurangzeb, till 1857, that is a one part. But after the first war of independence, the things have started changing. And here we can locate it from 1885, that was establishment of INC. So again, this is historical thing, so that's why I'm doing it briefly, but it will give you a sense of insight to understand the things. Now, what happened? INC. INC was a collective body which has started demanding certain rights from the Britishers. A right to participate in decision making, right to participate in local level elections, and so on. So, like that, it has started. But when we talk about demand for the fundamental right, the first time it came in 1895. Now, what happened in 1895? You might be knowing about Dr. Annie Besant, right? So, it was Dr. Annie Besant who was associated with Home Rule League movement, also you might be knowing, right? Then she drafted the Constitution of India Bill. Now, please remember, it is a Constitution of India Bill. It is not about Constitution. Basically, I've told you, the Britishers used to call our Government of India Act also as Constitution of India Act. So it was a bill. It will become act only if it is passed by the Parliament. Parliament means the British Parliament. So she drafted, and here she demanded some fundamental rights. Some fundamental rights means which are known as fundamental rights today, but initially at that time it was just a right. Like, for example, she demanded for freedom of speech and expression. Now we know that this is one of the important thing when we study the Article 19 of the Constitution. In our journey, we'll come to know that there is a right called basic freedom, under which we have a freedom of speech and expression. But this was first time demanded by Dr. Annie Besant in the draft bill that was known as Constitution of India Bill in 1895. Along with that, she also demanded for the EBL. EBL stands for Equality Before Law. So this concept of equality before law we'll get to know when we'll do the article 14, which talks about equality parts. So don't worry, I'll explain you all those things, but I'm just trying to give you a link how it has started and how it has started coming into what demand. Then like that, she also demanded for right to property, which we'll study under article 31 of the Constitution, but now we know that it has been shifted to 300A. So that's how you can actually remember the traces. Even if you don't remember this much, that's fine. What you can do, just give the passing reference that 1885 establishment of Congress, that is INC, 1895 demand from Dr. Annie Besant in the form of Constitution of India Bill, like that. Then before the passage of Government of India Act 1919, we know that this was also a landmark judgment, a landmark act. But before that, that is in 1980, the CWC stands for Congress Working Committee, right? So they have demanded, Congress Working Committee had demanded what? Inclusion of certain rights. Is that clear? What kind of inclusion? They said that you must declare declaration of rights. Now you might be knowing what is declaration of rights. If not, then you might have heard about a term called Bill of Rights. So it was a sort of Bill of Rights which were demanded by Congress Working Committee, which contains certain basic rights like right to equality, right to freedom, and so on before the British government, right? And though it was not passed, obviously we know that it was not included in Government of India Act 99, but this was a demand made by the what? Congress or Congress Working Committee. Is that clear? Perfect. Then the third event, what we need to remember, there are 3-4 events which we need to remember, so that you can write in one paragraph after the introduction to give the impression to the examiner that you know the things in detail. In 1925, there was a committee headed by M.K. Gandhi. So, Gandhi Committee, right? they have drafted a bill that was known as Commonwealth of India Bill. So this Commonwealth of India Bill is, is what? See, everywhere I'm writing bill because it is going to become an act only if it is passed, and we know that why the Britishers will pass it. But this was a demand, right? Here, even the Gandhi Committee demanded certain rights which later became the fundamental rights in our constitution. Like, for example, the same thing. They demanded right to liberty. Liberty means you can associate it with freedom. Then right to freedom of religion. So right to liberty, right to freedom of religion, then right to property, then right to assemble peacefully without arms, what we know as today's a fundamental right again in mm, assembly or peaceful, right to form union or association. These rights we'll see in Article 19 when we'll do, and so on. Equality before law, EBL, etc. So these were some of the demands which were made by what Gandhi Committee in 1925. And last but not the least, in 1928, you might have heard about a report called Nehru Report, or which you'll study in your history also, prepared by the Motilal Nehru, that is the senior Nehru, who incorporated all the demands which were made in the past by Annie Besant, by Congress Working Committee and MK Gandhi Committee. And only addition was it has included some demands for the writs also, especially the writ of habeas corpus. So now you might not understand habeas corpus, but when we'll do Article 32, I'll explain you what is habeas corpus, right? Plus, it has also talked about the no discrimination on the grounds of race, religion, caste, and so on. Abolition of social levels like untouchability, etc., were demanded in Nehru report, or we can say Nehru Committee report. Is that clear? So this was basically what I'm trying to tell you is nothing but evolutionary perspective of fundamental right, in which you can mention a couple of lines, starting with giving the brief introduction, how it has started from ancient times, and in ancient times also you can mention about a couple of words like nature of state, primitive. Then apart from that, social contract theory you can mention about, and some of the rights which were given in the ancient era also. Then you can jump onto the Indian scenario. You can start it from the struggle, that is freedom struggle, and there also focus upon second part, that is starting from establishment or formation of INC. And then these are the most important things you must mention. First point, second point, that is Dr. Annie Besant, then Government of India Act 1919. Third point, that is 1925, and fourth point, that is Nehru report. With this you can close. Already I've told you in Government of India Act 1935 there was not much to discuss because the major difference between present day constitution and the Government of India Act 1935 was the fundamental rights were missing. Is it clear? Perfect. Then after understanding this, let's try to understand some of the essential nature, characteristics, or features of fundamental right. Again, these are the part of introduction only, right? And after completing the introduction, then we can enter into the next part. Is that clear? So when we talk about nature, feature, and characteristic, then what are the points we need to remember? Let's try to look into that as well. So already I've told you that when we talk about nature, some of the points you may understand, some of the points you may not. So don't worry about them as of right now. Okay. First of all, when we talk about the fundamental right, they are not absolute in nature. So what is the meaning of they are not absolute? That means they are not unlimited. You'll understand this meaning later on in detail, but as of now, please remember they are not absolute, they are not unlimited. That means they are under some limitations, or we can say restrictions. Now here you'll come across a term that is called reasonable restriction. So please mark this term. I'll explain you in detail what is reasonable, who will decide whether it is reasonable or not, But reasonable simply implies based upon the logic, based upon the rationality, rather than being arbitrary in nature. आर्बिट्री नहीं होना चाहिए कि इसकी शक्ल पसंद नहीं है तो उसको फांसी पे चढ़ा दो, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. If somebody is hanged till death, there has to be a logical reasons behind that. So they are not absolute. That means reasonable restrictions can be imposed by the state. Then another point, what do you need to remember? They are not permanent in nature. So when we say they are not permanent, that means what? They are subjected to change. And the moment we say they are subjected to change, that means they are subjected to amendments. So here we'll have a topic, amendability of fundamental right, that we'll discuss in Article 13. So there I'll explain how the fundamental rights can be amended, what are the restrictions for the amendment, what is the concept of basic structure and so on. But as a student, what do you need to remember? They are not permanent. They are not absolute. Third, can they be suspended? Yes, they can be suspended. So suspension or suspended, but not in normal times, during some exceptional cases, right? Or unforeseen circumstances, maybe in the case of emergency. So once we discuss that, I'll tell you which are the articles which are going to be suspended. There are articles which may not be suspended, or there are articles which are going to be partially suspended, and so on. And what is the procedure for their suspension? So point here is they can be suspended. Answer is yes, they can be, right? But provided there has to be some conditions for that. Generally, they are not suspended in normal times. Is it clear? Okay. Then similarly, we can see that this was point number just a second, 3. So when we talk about the point number 4, then there are some what restrictions in the fundamental rights only on the fundamental rights. So we'll see those things also, like when we study the article 31, especially 31A, 31B, 31C, and so on. There we'll see what some of the reasonable restrictions which are there in the constitution itself. Already I've told you some restrictions would be there in 33, 34, 35. So you may not understand as a beginner, but just keep a note of it. When we'll reach there, I'll definitely connect it. Yes. Then as far as the protection of the fundamental rights, so they are protected, and the constitution provided the means of protection by the apex court of the country, that is honorable Supreme Court or highest judiciary in our country. They actually protect these rights for us. So if something goes wrong, or the rights are abrogated or snatched away or curbed away, infringed upon, then the honorable Supreme Court will take care of it. Which part? I mean, that part we'll study when we'll talk about the remedy part, which is mentioned in Article 32. So the Constitution also protects it, and on behalf of Constitution, it is the responsibility of the Supreme Court to protect those rights. Is that clear? Okay. Then sixth point, what do you need to remember? That these fundamental rights are available to everyone. So availability of fundamental right, when we say everyone, matlab person or the people, that is population. But when we talk about the population, already I've told you the persons or the population residing in a country is what? Divided into citizens and non-citizens. So when we talk about availability of fundamental rights for citizens, no doubt about it, all the rights are available to the citizen. Here we'll have some limited or restricted rights. So limited and restricted means what? Those rights which are available only to citizen, not to a non-citizen. So remember here, if you can remember, if not, slowly and gradually you will be. There are certain rights which are available to only Indian citizen. 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30. That's it. Why so? We'll discuss that in detail. But these are the rights which are available only to citizen. Please remember. They are not given to what? Non-citizens. Is that clear? Yes. So articles available or rights available to only citizens are what? 15, 16, 19, 29, 30. Does it mean it is not available to non-citizen? It may be limited and restricted, but this is the exclusively for citizen. When we talk about any person, whether he or she is a citizen. Then there are rights which are available to any person. For example, Article 14, right to equality or equality before law or rule of law. Then when we talk about other, then Article 20, protection in case of conviction. 21, right to life, right? 23, trafficking and all those things. So like that, there are many rights which are available to any person on the soil of India. But these are rights which are exclusively available to, please remember, citizens, right? Okay. Then, seventh point, what you need to remember, there are certain rights which are outside part 3 also. For though they are not titled as fundamental right, but they are rights outside part 3. That means fundamental right, but they have somewhat implication like fundamental right only. For example, you might have heard about right to vote. So it is given in Article 326, right? Elections to Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Vidhan Parishad, etc., etc., etc. Right? On the basis of adult suffrage. So this is also very important right, but not as a fundamental right. Though there is a debate that it should be made a fundamental right, but we'll see those pros and cons. Similarly, I've told you that right to property. So right to property was initially a fundamental right, but now it's a part of Article 300A. So it's a legal, or you can say it's a constitutional right rather than a fundamental right. Similarly, right to what? Trade or commerce and all those things mentioned in Article 301, right? That is freedom of trade. But that is also outside the part 3 of the Constitution. Is that clear? So like that you can say that there are certain rights which are very important, but they are what? Not the part of fundamental right as of now. Is it clear? Somewhat? Perfect. So this is the brief what you can give as far as the introduction is concerned. So let me quickly remind you what we have done so far. In intro part, we have first attempted to understand the meaning and the definition part. Then we also attempted to understand some evolutionary perspective or historical perspective, some nature, feature, and characteristics, though not all, some of them, right? Why some of them? Because all of them we'll discuss once we gradually proceed. If we'll discuss it here, then it would be difficult for us to understand all of them. Now, some bit of topics are remaining as far as the intro is concerned, but that will take later as the class will progress. So you have to wait and watch. So what next? Now we'll enter into what? As I've told you, the classification part. So now we are going to enter into the classification of fundamental rights. And under the classification, as I've told you, we have a sevenfold classification. But before that, there are two articles which are out of the classification or outside the classification, Article 12 and Article 13. And then we have the classification starts with right to equality, 14 to 18, or right to freedom, 19 to 22, and so on. So that part we'll discuss. But initially we have to start with 12 and 13. So what we'll do in the next class, we'll talk about the Article 12. I have told you to remember it by one word, that is state. But it would be interesting to know that though this article sounds to be very small, in books generally it is given less than a half of a page, but it is very big and elaborate. Similarly, Article 13 we have to remember with a term called law. So there we'll understand the meaning of law. But in almost all the standard sources, you'll find that they are given in a very short and crispy manner. However, as a student, we need to understand them in detail because what? If you don't understand them in detail, you will actually lag behind the other students who have done this article thoroughly and with the analytical perspective. So that part, as I've told you, we are going to take care in the next class. Till then, the request from you is nothing but please do revise the previous classes, do the revision. From NCERT, read a chapter as a homework, which is there on rights. And if you have Lakshmikant, then I would request you to read Article 12 and Article 13 from that book so that at least you have some basic background or knowledge of what Article 12 and 13 implies. Is that clear? Perfect. So thank you and have a great day ahead. Study hard. Bye.